We had two real young members of our cast on How the West Was Won, and when little Jesse would yell out, "Jim, do the thing!" Here he is dressed as Zeb McCann in his buckskin. He'd come out of his dressing room like that, and everybody would be in hysterics. You know, you knew it was a good day with him.
Hi, I'm Rob Word. Welcome to a very special A Word on Westerns. We are in Lone Pine, California, once again with a guest that we've had before, but he's got so many great stories. He's such a star. He's got a new series probably coming out, Babylon 5, a new version. You know who I'm talking about. Big Bruce Boxleitner, right here.
Big Bruce.
Big Bruce. How are you, Big Bruce?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thank you.
So this is exciting about Babylon 5.
Yeah, we're doing a pilot for the CW. It's a reimagining of a show that I wrapped 25 years ago. And we're not playing the same characters. There'll be a brand new, like they call it, reimagining, reboot, however you want to term it. Written by the same man that created it, his imagination, Joseph Michael Straczynski. We call him the Great Maker. He's a genius. And Warner's has given him carte blanche to go with this.
It was serialized, so as a streaming show, I think people probably discovered it maybe for the first time who hadn't seen them all, and it's easier to follow that very complex story.
Yeah, every character had a major arc throughout it. You know, it went for 5 years. I joined it 1 year in for the second season, and then carried it on through the rest of it, and then 4 television movies, and then they did a spin-off, which I was not a part of. Nevertheless, it is a saga, very pre-Game of Thrones. As you know, traditionally television did not do continuing stories because then in syndication they'd have to try to put that thing back together in the order in which they're supposed to be shown instead of just throwing them on willy-nilly. So we didn't just have, we had a couple, I have to say, there were a couple of standalone episodes when we had a special guest star and we needed to finish them off, so to speak, out through the airlock. Anyway, little and now if you notice, on all television series, it's a continuing story. You know,
well, people are used to streaming now. Netflix changed the whole landscape.
Yeah, you're right. But we were way ahead of all of them.
But sci-fi is, it's like a Western, and you've done some terrific Westerns, and with your mentor, I guess I could say James Arness was your mentor.
Yeah, and I mean, he probably starred in 2 of the finest of the creature features of the 1950s.
The Thing.
The first one, The Thing, is probably the one that resonates the most.
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly?
And The Thing, I think, is a classic, never to be matched so far as the 1950s, the Red Scare, all those things that were going on kind of symbolically got in that story.
And the way it was shot, too. I know they say Hawks didn't direct it, but all of that overlapping dialogue and the themes
Pure Howard Hawks. Are you kidding me? That's his whole M.O. It's still that kind of dialogue. It's so Hawksian, if that can be used as a term. You know, because of the overlapping natural dialogue and then these quippy things. Of course, the gal pal there, she's got the same kind of jive going, you know, with the guys and trying to make it with, what was his name, the red-haired?
Kenneth Tobey.
Ken Tobey saved the world more than a few times.
Oh, he did.
Yes, he did in those days. Then there was Them.
There is no word to describe them. The skies above and the seas below, infested by swarms of nightmare creatures.
Which about basically a comment on the nuclear experiments being done out in the high desert, and obviously the ants grew to gigantic size and invaded Los Angeles.
Now, I know you spent a lot of time with Arness. Did you ever discuss those early films with him?
Oh, I discussed The Thing, yeah. And you know, we had 2 real young members of our cast on How the West Was Won, and when little Jesse would yell out, "Jim, do the thing!" Here he is dressed as Zeb McCann in his buckskin. He'd come out of his dressing room like that, and everybody would be in hysterics. You know, he knew it was a good day with him.
Yeah.
But no, he loved it. Well, Jim, you know, that was what he did. He was a big man, and it required that to play that.
Well, speaking of him being a big man, I know that when you did the remake of Red River, you're the one who suggested him. Who were some of the other people that they were talking about to do Red River?
Well, we had, how many big movie stars at that time were starting to do television? You had Kirk Douglas, you had Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum had scored really big with the Herman Wouk Winds of War series. And Kirk, I did a Hallmark Hall of Fame playing his son. And still very vital, very into the process and wanting, So I guess it could have worked. You think of especially Kirk Douglas's acting style. He could have been a very sort of, strident, commanding guy. I remember when I worked with him, I called him Spartacus, and he got a kick out of it. I said, well, sir, you were 70 feet tall to me in the movie theater. So, but it was a number of those people. And strangely enough, the most obvious guy, and I think you agree with that, would have been, who was John Wayne on television? For 20 years, he was in America's living rooms. I mean, he was the most obvious choice, and is the one they didn't want. Because there's also, in the many producers, they want to go against.
Well, and they wanted a movie star, not a TV star.
Exactly. Steve Mills over there.
Steve Mills was a great executive at CBS.
Yes, he was. And he knew, too.
He greenlit Lonesome Dove, too.
Yeah. I mean, but he also, we had to go through this process, let them go through everything. Kirk made certain demands they just couldn't agree with, and I think Robert Mitchum did too.
And Arness, though, he brought a legacy and connection with John Wayne that these others, while they worked with him, they didn't have.
Kirk did, certainly. Sure, and Mitchum, both
of them did. El Dorado and War Wagon.
That's right.
And Kirk did actually a couple with Duke.
In Harm's Way with him. Otto Preminger's In Harm's Way he did with him. Yeah, you're right. There was a legacy that Jim brought. And I think to the audience that would watch this in 1988, it was a no-brainer. And he was hesitant about doing it because his former boss and mentor, I think very much in the same way, was so big and so grand in that Jim, there was a very, I want to say he had a kind of a very reclusive side to him. And I don't think he was afraid to do it. It's just that it was Duke's. And I think, he was in all of Wayne, too. Remember that famous line at an award show when Wayne stood next to Jim was going to be giving him an award. You're bigger than me. And he said, taller, maybe. Because he really revered Duke. I mean, Duke gave him basically a career.
Yeah.
And
he didn't want to do that.
He didn't want to do Gunsmoke. He wanted to be a movie star.
You bet. Yeah.
And I won't say the exact words that I heard Arnett say because they were both had a few drinks. And he convinced him that, this new thing, television, you're going to be the big man. And he was 6'7", 8", somewhere around there in boots.
Yeah, he was 6'7".
Yeah, I stood in his shade. The shade, we'd be standing there waiting out there in the middle of Utah, and he'd be talking, and I'd just kind of edge my way a little closer.
And he's in moccasins.
And he's in moccasins. He's standing there, and there's just he's like standing under a pine tree, for God's sake. So anyway, it was quite an experience, and we worked quite a few things together. And his last Gunsmoke was especially poignant because I could kind of tell he was slowing down.
That's the last thing he ever did.
I know. It was the last movie he did. Yeah, the last Gunsmoke. It's called One Man's Justice, and he made 5 of those. That was his last turn as Matt Dillon, and so what a way to go out, And he kind of what did he do? McLean's Law. I think there was a brief trying to do a contemporary
with John Mantley too. They tried to do it because
and
Dirty Harry was happening at that time.
Well,
and
he did.
Duke did McHugh and Brannigan. That didn't work.
Yeah, it
didn't work.
The audience, after a certain time, either we saw him in a military uniform, and for the most, we saw him in some kind of frontiersman, a cowboy or whatever, or a cavalryman, and that is so ingrained in the American public. But so was Jim, and so that was the wonderful thing when he left Gunsmoke. He had the opportunity to don buckskins. He grew his hair long. After all, Jim Arness was a surfer. That's it's hard for people to believe this, but I remember Greg Harrison saying off of Catalina, he used to surf with Marshal Dillon many, many times. So they did know of him.
Wow.
And this is the strange thing. I never quite got the truth about when we were going to do Red River. Why didn't Gregory? Because Gregory was the executive producer. It was he and Frank Levy, his partner, had the rights to Red River. Why did they not even think of him in the first place? I think his partner was the one that didn't want to. He wanted to go off in some other direction.
They wanted a movie star.
They wanted a movie star. Jim wasn't that.
That's what
but it
was
would have
happening
never worked.
then. Right. The scripts that were different, the storyline in the TV movie, Gregory Harrison's part, is richer. There's more to it. There's more of a relationship.
Much more.
And of course, it was cut out in the middle of shooting of Red River because John Ireland was making it with Joanne Drew, who he married, and that is somebody that Howard Hawks had been after.
Yes, he had affections for her. I think as Greg told me, that they felt the script was closer to the one that we did, was closer to Borden Chase's story. Now, I've not read that, so I can't verify
Did you ever read the original script, Red River?
No, in fact, no, I didn't. I mean, I do have a copy of it.
Because I'm just wondering what the scenes originally were. Maybe the script that's floating around is the shooting script now, because I think they did initially shoot some of those scenes and cut it out because all of a sudden John Ireland's just not in the movie.
Yeah, and he gets wounded by Dunson as Dunson's coming into town to get
It's better
Matthew.
With you outdrawing him.
Yeah,
that's a good scene.
It added a whole different thing to it, and then it got to, because it kind of muddied the water. Why does he shoot him, Mr. Dunson? But that could have been done on the fly too while they were on location. How about we do it this way? Maybe Hawks. It's a lot of speculation, and we can't really pin that down. But it was different enough. We had to do it different enough. You couldn't just do the same movie, like there was a couple of movies that they literally did frame for frame. What was that? La Femme Nikita was done with young Fonda. What was her name?
And they redid the Getaway frame.
The Getaway frame for frame.
And that was
what do we remember?
And
we remember what?
We remember Steve McQueen and
right.
Peckinpah's version.
Right, exactly. So that's always going to happen. But Arness was the man. And I think he delivered it.
I know you're a big Western fan,
yeah.
And especially the John Wayne films. And, there's so many of them, the different eras that he goes through.
Who had as long a career as this man?
He is probably, the king.
I do have to say, I think he's the greatest movie star because of his longevity, that name, which was not his name, it was a star-making name. Which we don't do much anymore. And,
no, you can't even pronounce or spell anybody's name anymore.
No, you can't. But then, even in the simplest, in the jungles of New Guinea, someone knew who John Wayne was. John Wayne, or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All over the world. And because what was the tally on how many movies he did? I think it was somewhere like
almost 200, like 160, I think.
That's still a lot.
And those are feature films.
Yeah, they are feature films. And the Lone Star.
The Lone Star, he was doing 6 or 8
serials.
a year of those.
Yeah.
And then the serials, of course, there were 12 to 15 chapters of Hurricane Express and the Three Musketeers.
So you had this long, long career. How many generations grew up with that, And then I would say, too, probably the 50s generation, Jim Arness was introduced in a starring role. He was in people's living rooms in that little box that television started off to be, a big man in a little box. So he looked even bigger, in some strange way. And in black and white, half hours, and then it went to hour, and then it went to color.
Something that I've noticed is that because those half-hour shows all based on the radio show,
yes,
they were 26 and a half minutes long, which is about 4 or 5 minutes longer than half hours are today. And they are so sped up. I see Chester limping, but then because it's sped up, I'm seeing Jim Arness limp too.
Yes.
And it's so...
And you know that story. A joke on the set was that when Dennis, who had... and I'm not sure, is it in the radio, is his deputy got a leg?
None.
This was
None
an actor's
whatsoever.
choice.
They made it up.
Yeah.
Because Dennis was so good looking. Dennis Weaver, the actor.
Yes, he was.
They said, we need to give him something that makes him not... a romantic lead because he'll be competing with Arness. And so they said the limp. And
of course he had his twang,
which was interesting.
But it set the bar for the sidekick deputy for Jim, because then we went on to Ken Curtis.
Yeah. Ken was so great. He and Milburn Stone. Now, you mentioned something to me about everybody thought that Matt Dillon, Jim Arness, and Miss Kitty would be having something in real life. What was going on?
Milburn Stone and Amanda Blake had a long-time love affair, off and on. It was a rowdy one. How about I say rowdy? I think that's probably the best way to say it. But they did. And also, because of the times, we could not. They didn't want to tie Matt Dillon down, but it was implied that there was a romance or affection for each other.
It would have killed the show. It would have stopped it if they'd actually gotten together.
Yeah, it would have. That's what
chemistry
they thought.
would have changed.
Right. So,
those were
different
great
times,
shows.
different shows. But if you notice, it still plays constantly. Some guy quoted me, said, "Well, you said he was your mentor," and I said, "Well, mentor not in the sense that I got to watch a man who clearly led a cast as the star of a television show, and just what is that job? It's not just learning lines and showing up and hitting your marks and doing the dialogue, doing scenes, and then going home." Even though at the end of the day, years later, Jim would literally stand there with his gun belt, and if Earl Hontoon wasn't there when the director said, "And that's a wrap for today," that gun belt, Jim just would go like that. The only hours he'd have to be taking that gun out of the dirt and oiling it up and cleaning it. So he was always there. He was inching in. He did this on How the West Would Win too. The prop guys, they catch it just as that thing went. So won't be up all night cleaning this thing for tomorrow. So he just did that to mess with him. I mean, his crews would follow him to hell and back. Yeah. That's the kind of thing you want out of your crew members who you spend day in and day out. The one thing on a Western, I always say this, is that there is no pampering, especially if it's an outdoor picture. You're out there, everyone's going through the same thing you're going through. Now, maybe the actors get a little, they get to sit under a shade or something, but the electricians inevitably find something to sit under, and everybody does, when you're out in the weather, but you're getting dirty, you're getting sweaty, you're freezing to death, and the opposite too, When we were watching Red River last night, I kept thinking of everything was done out on that ranch at night in November of '88. And it was the shortest days of the year. When does someone pick to do an outdoor action picture when you have how many hours? By 4:30, light was going already, even out there in the desert. And then, of course, deserts get so cold. Look how cold it was here last night. It was warm during the day down there. And so we would be peeling all day, when you had 3 layers of clothes, and then we were trying to add layers of clothes. I literally slept in a campfire one time. I swear to God, my chaps were singed. I couldn't get close enough to the fire. Because to get to where we were, I actually slept with some people in the back of a truck. I don't even know who they were. Everybody just piled up and used body warmth, just to get some shut-eye at 3 a.m. because we shot all nights.
Well, Bruce Boxleitner is a rugged hero, that's for sure.
He wouldn't do it again right now. I tell you right now, you have to pay me a lot more.
It's a young man's game, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Bruce, for being with us.
Thank you, buddy.
All right,
Thank
pal.
you.
All right.
Always.